We have this in America. We have this issue with the blue line and the politics of policing and the politics and perception of police forces. And I think that's got to overlap at some level into the work you're doing and other people behind the scenes trying to deal with some of the real crimes that are going on that we just don't see. You know, when you see a shooting of somebody in a city, that's what the media wants to focus on. So, how challenging would you say is a current political narrative towards police forces and policing? In terms of how effective or ineffective law enforcement is in doing their job. It seems to me that if the political narrative is the way it is, and there's not the support, certainly for Back in the Blue, it would have a ripple effect into investigations and law enforcement that's pursuing drugs, human trafficking, etc.
Absolutely. And that with this, I look at a false narrative that's going on now in this country that somehow the police have it in for minority citizens, which is just, it's absurd. It's absurd. The stats totally go against that. And me being on the street, I knew and saw police racism back in the 80s, but I also saw it cleaned up in the 90s, a la Rodney King. After the Rodney King incident, right, and actually as a private investigator, I was part of that investigation, one of the passengers in the car with Rodney King. So I know that case very well. That turned into a lot of reform in policing. So now when you go out in policing, it's nothing like it was in the 80s or 90s. It's completely changed. It's high professional. The police in this country are the best in the world, the best trained. They have hearts to serve. They love people. So when you have this false narrative, it's really hurtful, to people who really understand. Hey, that's not what's going on here. That has nothing to do with it. But to address your question about how police can function, it's all about resources. So, for example, let's use child sex trafficking on this. If most of the time a child is a runaway, and I'll tell you a true story, if it's okay, to illustrate my point here. There was a 14-year-old girl in Reno, Nevada. It's a true story. And a gang member from San Diego, 26-year-old gang member, started to have conversations with her on social networking, of course, secretive. So he actually coerced mentally this young girl to leave the safety of her home, and he drove up to Sparks, Nevada, and she went out of her window. Mom came to get her. She was gone. She had no idea she's with this guy because all the answers were in here.
Right.
So what happens is the patrolman comes, takes a report, reports it to the National Crime Information Center run by the FBI. So if any police officer pulls this young girl over, they know she's a runaway and can take her. But a lot of our cases, and now it's 251 successful operations since December 2014, they tell the girl, the trafficker, as this one did, if we get pulled over, anything happens, don't tell them your real name, give them a phony name. And of course, you can't expect a 14-year-old girl to have ID. She just doesn't have ID, right? You don't get ID at 14. So what happened is he takes her to Mexico and starts flying her up with drugs and selling her. And the mother finally calls us because, let's go back to the police. He does his report. Most police officers get 3, 5, 6 days to finish their report. Then it goes over to a detective. Then usually goes to a missing persons detective who gets it. And then they're probably overwhelmed. I mean, one detective, 50 to 150 reports. So they have to wait and go through all these other reports. And so because it's a runaway without any proof of they can't prove that anything happened. There was no kidnapping. If the child doesn't have an immediate medical emergency, then it's a runaway report, which is a very low priority report.
Right.
So the parents got a hold of us. We found her in 2 days. We coordinated with the federal law enforcement officials in Mexico and here in the country, an undercover operation, and got her back.